All right, hi folks. This is Norwich 93 CMP again, doing another video since we're stuck in the house with this COVID-19. One of the things I get a lot of questions up at my table at gun shows is, you have books. What are the best books? So for the M1 Carbine and the M1 Garand, I put out some of the books that I use mostly. I do have some others, but I'm just not going to recommend them to you for a couple of reasons. But I do want to show the most often ones I go to and why, because it's important to know what you want to collect, what you want to get out from the collecting of an M1 Garand or a Carbine. So one book may not be as good as the other. So I'm going to first start off with the North Cape Publication series, and this happens to be the Carbine and the Garand book. Obviously, depending upon the age of the video, there's going to be newer variations. This one is the current one. This one's basically just out of print, and it's going to have a new version soon. But what Craig Reich does with the Carbine and Joe Poyer and Craig Reich do with the Garand is really nice, and it goes by a little bit of the technical history, but not in depth. And for the price point for these, are about $24. You can't go wrong. And just getting into the collecting of M1 Carbines and Grands, they're very easy to follow. They're not thick. And I just want to show you. So he may talk about a little bit in here, talks about like receivers, but what's the nicest thing is what he does is he breaks it down by parts, because the M1 Carbines had a bunch of code markings. Not any book is going to be 100% true. Don't ever think that it's the Bible and there's nothing else that exists. I have a lot of notes in my own book on the same, what is this here? Rear sights. Rear sights. And here's my markups of rear sights. So I have my own notes, and I handwrite in my own personal book that I use and talk to people about. But it's basically by manufacturer, and then goes by type, and then within it has the markings and the serial number ranges about when they're seen. And he does it for all the parts of the rifle. So this book is really good to give a little bit of history about something. Accessories in here, magazines, a little bit of a breakdown, rebuilds. Everything's in this little book. Like I say, for $24, this is a good series of books. It's very similar with the M1 Grands, just not as good enough as far as I think as a breakdown by serial numbers, but it's close. Grands were made differently, and they don't have the markings and went through the variation really history like the Carbines, but there was a lot of revision numbers that you'll see, and the markings were very different. There's a lot of unmarked parts. So this is the companion book to that. Like, these two together should be about 50 bucks for you if you go to a gun show, versus some of the other books. Another book series that I do use is Mr. Harrison's. Mr. Harrison's is really good. He was kind of like the earlier pioneer. A lot of his stuff is accurate, and a lot of his stuff is inaccurate. He makes references to certain things, like here's a Carbine here. This is the model, he calls it the model of 1944. Well, there's going to be a lot of Carbines that aren't going to look like this in 1944. They're going to have a narrow band, and they may have the flip sight. He talks about that there. But there's different variations, and he just didn't go through it as much. He talks about part by part. So basically, for every gun, there's only about 5 little diagrams. But he does go better and talks about the companies and the lateral support. And there's also a cartouche. Let's see if I can find it, see if I have it in here. I know it's in here someplace. He has a cartouche overlay. There it is. Cartouche overlay. So it's something that you can use to evaluate stocks, which is really nice that Harrison does. I don't think he does it for the M1 Garand, but I know he does it for the M1 Carbine. This book's probably like 30 some odd dollars. They're basically out of print, but once in a while you do see them. This is the companion book for the M1 Grands. Let's see, I don't think there's an overlay in there. Yes, there is an overlay in there. I just saw it. So it's about stock cartouches. This one, he also talks about the bayonets. There's his stock cartouches. So for 30 some odd dollars to get that shipped. Sometimes you can find those on Amazon. It's pretty good. It's the same situation over there, but it does go through like different types and some milling patterns. That's a good source that I go to, that I've seen. A couple more of the larger, heavier books, literally and figuratively. On the left are the War Baby series by Larry Ruth. So that first one right there is the first volume, and he starts it off. The second volume, he talks about additional stuff, in addition to the USGI carbines, but he also does a few corrections to the first volume. And the third volume's absolutely huge, even super more expanded than the first two volumes, and corrections. That one just came about a few years ago. But for the M1 Grands, one of the newest books is this one here by Bruce Canfield. The M1 Grand Rifle. It's huge. So the prices for these books are like 60 to 70. This one's a little bit more, even though it's thinner. And that one's like 80 to 90, somewhere in that price range. So if you can get used ones, obviously, or get new ones. But like that whole set, I sell for like over like 150 bucks for the set of 3. The M1 Grand Rifle by Canfield. This is by Mowbray. That's a collector grade publications, a Canadian company. This is by Mowbray Publications, and they're in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. This is a newer book, and he did a lot of details. So when he says a lot of detailed illustrations, he is not joking. He talks about all the manufacturers. It's got photos of inside. This is readers stuff. This is people who want to understand the history and really get into the collecting aspect and variations and how they made the M-block clips and all the inspectors and the variations that went through everything. It's not like by serial number like you saw with Poyer and Reich's books, but it's darn close. Color pictures. This one's about $89, I think $88, $89 I've seen it for. It's a very good book. These 3 are mainly for the collectors who want to read and understand everything about it. And then we have a lot of people who just come in and they just want technical data. So this one happens to be a very good book. It's basically a shop manual. And it's about the 30 caliber rifles, which is the M1 Grand. And he goes into the M1A series. This is very technical. So you're talking about dimensions and checking stuff with gauges and problems. How to troubleshoot stuff, how to glass bed, and all those kinds of things. Sometimes people come in and ask me for that because they want to shoot in M1 Grand matches, CMP matches, and be qualified to be a member of the CMP to get rifles. Well, a lot of stuff they do is has to be legal and how to do things and troubleshoot. They use something like this. So this book's like 44 to 50 bucks or something like that, but it's a very good book also. So I just wanted to give you a quick overview. I've never seen a video on a review on books. There are a couple books to stay away from. Usually, I almost always say, like the older variation books, just because that I showed you one of them by Craig Reich, it's like a series 6 or 7 or something like that. You don't want to go out and pay $24 for the first version or the second version. Or if it's a little bit cheaper for $18, why? Because he did a lot of work and updated it to the newer one. You're actually going to end up losing money by purchasing something that's wrong or the way you thought it was. And lo and behold, there's a newer book out that would have told you that. There's another book that's out there that I took a look into and has really nice color period photographs of World War II. And I looked through it and I could just tell that certain things weren't right at all in it. And I sold that book at a loss, and I never recommend it to anybody. So just be careful. Just because it's a book and it costs money and it looks pretty or there's pretty pictures in it, doesn't mean that it's any good. Just be careful. Ask other collectors. Go to gun shows. Ask questions on online forums or on social networking. Join a site. And just ask the question. All right, that's all I have for now. Take a look at the other videos on the channel and have a good one.